So the dealer told me that that was not in the 2014 Camaro. They were wrong. So I was able to get the snout off. You actually have to take out all the bolts. There are 10 of them on the intake sides, and actually lift the whole supercharger up in order to clear the snout from the underside of the supercharger, and also it wants to hit here. So I loosened up the snout with the supercharger bolted down. It wasn't too hard. I took a big screwdriver and just pried on the one spot, and it just popped, and then it was loose. And then I just tightened it back up a little bit to give me leverage working on this. Remember, there's 10 bolts. I had one that was hiding with the paper towel that I had put down there to keep stuff from falling in the intakes, and I was actually covering the head of it up. The service manual does not say how many bolts there are. It only gives a torque rating. So, well, that's really kind of a bummer that that's in there, so I'm gonna have to replace that. That's not gonna go back in. And give you a little tip on disassembling the lid on this thing. So here's the lid. This is the rear of the lid. And these bolts here you can't even see, and you're lucky to even be able to get your hand on them. These are probably the hardest to take out, and these are pretty hard as well, even though you can see them. This is the back of the lid, if I didn't say that just a minute ago. So the problem with this is this portion of the lid sits right about here. Yeah, you don't have a lot of room. And then this right here, it's not far away. So I used a trick that I read on the forum, and that was to take a rubber handled hammer and use the hammer between the lid and the cowl. And my hammer handle was oval shaped, so I put it in and I turned it, and that forced this up. And it forced it up just enough that I could get a quarter drive socket, 10mm socket extension, and universal joint down in there, that I was able to get onto that screw. I could feel the head of it by reaching around and guide it onto the top, and then they're not under very much torque, so it was pretty easy to start turning. And I just turned them until I thought they were loose. I left them as the last ones, and I left them in there because I knew if I tried taking them out of the lid, they're gonna fall behind the engine, and good chance they won't fall to the ground. They'll get stuck, and then, yeah, you know what a pain that is. So I left them in there, and to my delight, when I went to pick up the lid, the screws just stayed in their holes, because there's like rubber right there, and it holds the screws from just dropping out. It's kind of a good idea. So I hear a lot of things about assembling that people, they'll put the lid on and they'll use a magnetic socket to bring the screw back down onto top. I don't think I'm gonna do it that way. For one, I don't have a magnetic socket, but I'm just gonna put the bolt here because it holds it. It doesn't drop through. It just stays right where you put it. And I'll just leave those there. And then when I install the lid, I'll just come through the top with my socket, push down, and cinch it down that way. So I think that's gonna work fairly decent. These ones, because it's further out on the cowl doesn't flex up as much. You can't really get the ratchet over here. There's not enough room. And so I actually had to come this way with my finger, little bit of my fingertips, and do it 1/8 of a turn at a time with the wrench, and it was just a hassle. But once you get them down, you can get a ratcheting box end on there and get that tightened up pretty good. So, well, there it is. So here's the snout, and there is a little bit of damage to it. Not too bad. See if you can see it. Sorry. So right there, that groove. I don't think that's supposed to be there. You can see it's kind of chewed up right here. You can actually feel that. So it's starting to damage the shaft right in here. You can see it. And that's from the spring on that isolator. And eventually that thing would have broke. They usually break, I don't know, between 10 and 20,000 miles. And then that spring would have just been wearing on that, causing problems. So don't have to worry about that anymore. Yeah, that's pretty bad, pretty awful. So, well, this is going to get a pulley upgrade to the 2.5 inch. And I'll double check to make sure my bypass is set correctly. I've done it once. It looked pretty good. Ooh, that spins a lot. So there's a bypass right there. And there shouldn't be a gap there at the bottom. Very minimal. That might be a little bit of loss of boost right there. Might have been why my dyno run was a little bit slower and a little bit less power than what I thought, but I still think that looks pretty good. Looks pretty tight. Anyway, thanks for stopping by the channel, and we'll hope to see you again.